Hi, good morning, and welcome to our weekly edition of Tuesday Temple Takeaway. And this morning is the last in our current series on the life of Peter. And we will take a little break during August, and then we will resume our weekly Tuesday Temple Takeaway from September. But anyway, today we're looking at another very interesting incident in the life of God's servant, Peter, in Acts chapter 12. Peter occupies chapter 1 to chapter 12 is a big place in the book of Acts. And so chapter 12 is kind of the climax for him. And the church is growing, the church is expanding, the gospel is going out from Jerusalem into the Gentile world. Things are looking really good. However, there is, of course, on the other side, there is opposition. And there is Satan is promoting, orchestrating a relentless attack and opposition to the church. And here in Acts 12, the enemy really strikes hard. Herod, who's the grandson of Herod the Great, he wants to assert his authority. His popularity is waning, and he's not popular with the people, and so he's looking for ways to curry favor with them and gain popularity. And the one thing that he's struck on is that he could persecute this Christian church, this fledgling church, and take some of its leaders out and imprison them and harass them. And so he starts with James. He arrests James, who was one of the leaders of the church, and on some trumped up charge he brings James to trial, and you'll probably be aware that James was eventually beheaded. He was executed. This was much to the delight of the Jewish community. And because he's looking to give the Jewish people what they want. He was looking to gain popularity with them. And the one thing they wanted more than anything is for the Christian church to come under attack and persecution. So having taken James out, he thinks, well, I'm on a good thing here. So the next person I look for is the main man, and that's Peter. And he knew the Jews would be enthusiastic over that, because Peter had, he had run-ins with the Sanhedrin, the religious leaders of the day, and he had defied their instructions. And now it was Peter who had reached out to the Gentiles, a Jew like Peter reaching out to the Gentiles. And so he was public enemy number one as far as the Jews were concerned. And so he arrests Peter again on a trumped-up charge, and he basically throws him into prison for a period of time because of the Passover. And the intention was that he would bring him out after Passover for a trial, which would be like a kangaroo court, and Peter too would be executed. And so Peter is kept in a maximum security wing of the prison. Herod is very uneasy about having this man on site. And he takes no chances, because he assigns 16 soldiers to guard him. And so Peter, the leader of the early church, this influential man, is one side of the city in a prayer cell. But that's not all the story, because the second half of the story shows that there's another cell. And this time it's a prayer cell. So you have a prison cell on one side of the city, and then you have a prayer cell where God's people are meeting through the night and are praying for Peter's release. And the showdown between the prison cell and the prayer cell is about to happen. Herod's intention versus God's purpose. And when you come to chapter 5, verse 5 rather, in chapter 12, it begins with the word but. It says, Peter was kept in prison, but prayer was made on his behalf. And thank God for the buts in Scripture. They turn things. They're the beginning of a new direction. And Herod thought he had it all stitched up. He has him in prison. He has him under top security guard. And for him, it's only a question of a few days and then the inevitable but he's about to know that God is interested in what's happening. There's a divine dimension to this story. God is about to intervene. And the church bombards the throne of grace on Peter's behalf. There's a real intensity you sense about their praying. They're not just saying prayers, but they are praying. They are bombarding the throne of grace. You see, the prison door might be shut, but the door of heaven was wide open, and their prayers are ascending, and God is about to act. And so the night before the trial, the night before pending execution, we read that Peter is fast asleep in the cell. I don't know if I'd be asleep if I was the night before I was facing trial with probable execution. And, I don't know if I'd be happy to shut my eyes because you don't know what's awaiting you next morning. But Peter is relaxed. He's restful. He isn't writing his last will and testament out. He isn't shouting through the bars for mercy, for a last-minute pardon. He's not pacing up and down the cell. He's had his supper. He's said goodnight to the guards. And off to sleep he goes and settles down. And all was well, of course, with his soul. And death seems to be inevitable from a human perspective. It was the end. His time was up. But God is still a key player in this story, and God still had things for him to do. And in the middle of the night, Peter's fast asleep. It's just a routine night in the cell, and the guards weren't expecting anything different. And suddenly an angel arrives on the scene. The angel takes charge of operations. And he finds Peter sleepy and restful, but, he gives Peter certain instructions, and he takes charge of the whole operation. You see, the fact there was bars and locks and chains and guards and walls, none of that prevented the angel from entering this inner cell and finding Peter. And so there, right on the night before his execution, God intervenes. And Peter has to be jolted by the angel because he's probably feeling sleepy. He thinks he's still in a dream, perhaps. What's happening to me? The instructions are put your shoes on, put your outer clothing on. And Peter, half asleep, just follows the angel. It says they go through a series of iron gates and they open automatically. Long before Debenhams or John Lewis had automatic doors, God was opening locked doors long before them. And these doors just open as they walk towards them. Peter has to pinch himself. What's happening to me? Is this still a dream? I can't believe this. 1 minute I'm under guard by soldiers and chains, and now I'm on my way out of prison. There's the exit door. And as soon as he gets out onto the street, then the angel leaves him. The angel vanishes because it was job done for the angel. That was his assignment, to get Peter out of prison. And Peter has to make some quick decisions on his feet when he's outside in the street. And he realizes that there's a prayer meeting going on. He would have known that in the house of Mary, the mother of John Mark, they would have been having an all-night prayer meeting. And so he goes with great excitement to the house. He knows that they are praying, knocks on the door, and there's no answer at first, and he keeps knocking, and eventually the door is opened by a young girl named Rhoda, and it's all given with a touch of humour because she can't believe that it's Peter. But it's Peter they're praying for and his release. But when Peter shows up, they can't believe it. And you can imagine it's a bit like a pantomime scene. She goes in and says, Peter's at the door. And they might have said, oh, no, he's not. And then she would have said, oh, yes, he is. And Peter's standing there and knocks again. And eventually they come and they let him in. And, the theory is it can't be you because we're praying for you. And have you ever had any of those moments where what you've been praying for is miraculously just opened up like a flower, and you're thinking, is this right? Is this what I really wanted? And Peter goes in, and of course he tells them his story and tells them about his wonderful deliverance. And I'm sure the prayer meeting changed into a praise event very quickly. But if you think there was commotion in that house, think of what it was like at first light in the jail when they realised Peter had gone. The soldiers woke up and realised it was P45 time for them. And more than that, of course, they were killed because Herod was furious that this prized asset called Peter had a house under arrest and going to be executed, and his popularity would have risen with the Jewish community, has escaped from under his nose and been wonderfully delivered. So again, all these things follow the life of Peter. Over the last few number of weeks, we've looked at incidents that are unusual and peculiar to Peter. And here is one again, where the servant of God, this apostle of Jesus Christ, in a prayer cell, in a prison cell, but it's the prayer cell across the city that influences what happens in the prison cell. So keep praying. Keep praying for people who are in prisons themselves, prisons of addiction, prisons of all kinds of things that they might be involved in, that they feel trapped in. Prayer changes things. Get together with 2 or 3 people and start bombarding the throne of grace and praying for the release of people that you know and love. And let's see the great delivering hand of God move among us. Thank you for joining me on these Tuesday Temple Takeaways. Have a great summer. Have a nice break in August. And we shall resume in early September. The Lord bless you.